Hello and welcome to this video on creating narrative-driven learning experiences. As we all know, the power of a good story is very compelling. In fact, according to the cognitive psychologist Jerome Bruner, we are 22 times more likely to remember a fact when it's wrapped around a narrative. And why is that? It's because stories are so memorable and they provoke emotional reactions. So how can you start using and introducing narrative into your learning experiences? So first of all, we should start by analysing our audience and understanding your learning personas. You can then identify the learning outcomes that you want to achieve, and then next up, developing a compelling narrative in line with that persona. So this could be a character-driven story, a case study, or even a real-life scenario that your learning personas and your learners can relate to. Remember that all stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's always best to start with the end in mind and to make sure that that's tied very closely to your learning objective. Don't forget to be creative. Use descriptive language, create tension, create conflict, and incorporate multimedia assets where possible to make it more visually interesting. Your narrative should provide learners with opportunity to think critically and evaluate how they would act in a similar sort of situation. One really useful way of creating narrative is to look at the 7 plots. So if you're struggling for inspiration, there's a great book by Christopher Booker that might be able to help. In his book, he outlined 7 key plots that can be used for creating story. The first plot is overcoming the monster. This is where the protagonist faces a powerful enemy and obstacles, for example, Jaws. The second example is rags to riches, where the protagonist rises to success through hard work, determination, and endeavor. For example, somebody like Cinderella. The third one is the quest. The quest is where the protagonist sets out on a journey to achieve a goal. For example, the Odyssey. The fourth one is the voyage and the return, where the protagonist travels to an unfamiliar place and returns completely changed and transformed by the experience. My favorite example of this is The Wizard of Oz. The fifth one is comedy, a light-hearted, humorous affair intended to amuse, for example, The Hangover. The next is the tragedy, a story which typically ends with the downfall of the protagonist. For example, Romeo and Juliet, unforgettable. And finally, the rebirth, where the protagonist undergoes a personal transformation. For a great example of that is The Christmas Carol. So here are some bonus tips. First of all, release your content in chunks. Think of it as episodical to help build anticipation and expectation throughout the learning journey. Your learners should really want to know how the story ends. Also consider incorporating social learning into the experience, such as group discussions on where the protagonist is in the journey, or collaborative projects at key points in the narrative. The decisions made could even impact the story that you are revealing as part of the learning process. Don't forget, finally, to evaluate the effectiveness of the narrative-driven learning experience. Some of your audience may love it, some of them may not react to it so strongly, but seek back this important feedback from your audience to ensure that next time you get even better results. Now it's over to you to get creative.